Hi, and welcome to today's Truth in IT webinar, SMB Security Breaches, Lessons Learned from 5 Real Security Hacks. Today's webinar is a live video webinar where Curtis Preston, CEO of Truth in IT, will be speaking to Matt Lunzer, Director of Information Security with Mindshift, who are our sponsors today. The webinar is going to go about 30 minutes, and there is a place for you to ask your questions. There's a Q&A panel, so just submit your questions there, and we'll try to get them submitted while the guys are talking and try to get them answered. If for any reason we can't, someone from Mindshift or Curtis will get back to you with the answers at the conclusion of this event. Also, during the webinar, we are going to be giving away a Parrot mini drone. This is a very cool drone that you can fly. It's easy to use, and we've given away a lot of them, and everybody loves them. So good luck with that. Watch your name. We're going to flash the name of the winner on the bottom of the screen. So watch your name for that. If your name does flash, just let us know that you're here by filling in your name in the Q&A panel. Just let us know you've won, and we'll get that drone right out to you. So without further ado, I am going to switch things over. Stand by. Let me just switch the live stream over to Curtis and Matt. Okay, here we go. Curtis, take it away.
Thanks, Dave. So we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and by favorite, I mean one of the ones that gives me heartbreak, or not heartbreak, heartache, not joy. I enjoy talking about backups, but security, when I, going back 20, something years ago, when I was doing backups, I hated security, right? Security was the thing that got in the way of doing backups. Mm-hmm. And but now I see security as just another element of data protection, right? Because one of the ways that we lose data is bad people take it, right? So, speaking as a small business myself, this topic of SMB, real world hacks, I love hearing from other people's problems, right? They're much more exciting, much more interesting to talk about than mine. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, there's really no shortage of them. It seems as though we hear every day about another breach that takes place. So there's plenty of anecdotals to look at and analyze and hopefully learn from. And that's really what we anticipate doing here today.
Yeah. So how did, just curious, how did you select the ones that we're going to talk about today? Because, that was basically your background research.
Yeah, there's, again, there's plenty of anecdotals and stories out there about different security breaches. When researching the ones to use for today's discussion, we really tried to find security breaches that impacted small and medium-sized businesses. So it really correlated well to hopefully the audience that's in attendance today, and also try to come up with a diverse set of breaches that really reflect, I think, common incidents that occur and hopefully kind of span the landscape, if you will, across various type of breaches that occur. So that was really the criteria that went into selecting the stories for today.
Let me put on my glasses so that I can appear smarter and also be able to read the document that we're going to review.
Uh-oh, I don't have any. I'll have to go without.
Yeah, all right. Well, we'll go with virtual ones. So, so let's talk about why don't I'm going to have you lead, since you know these stories from the background, and then I'll jump in with questions. How about that? Why don't you jump into the first? We've got 4. Is it 4 or 5?
We've got 5 today, so time permitting,
yeah, okay.
We can go through all 5.
All right. So let's get started.
Sure.
Why don't you tell me about the first breach?
Sure. The first breach is really a social engineering attack where a hacker is masquerading as IT support and contacting an end user and asking the end user for their password in order to perform work on a particular ticket. In this example, and this is, again, a social engineering attack that is somewhat common, a person masquerades as support, contacts the end user, asks for their password, the end user, not really knowing that the person on the other end of the phone is masquerading as an IT support person, and that actually the IT support person themselves gives the hacker their password, and voila. The person that's masquerading as the IT support person or the hacker has credentials necessary in order to gain access to the network. Once that happens, anything is possible from there. So that's the first incident.
Yeah, so, I think about this, and given that we're talking about SMBs, you would think that this is the kind of hack, like it depends on, I have a phrase I use called TSBs, which is truly small businesses, right? This is like 5 people. I don't think this hack would necessarily work on a 5-person business, or like I wonder if it would, because everybody, right? So if somebody calls and says, "Hi, I'm from IT," you're like, "Well, you're not Steve. Steve is IT, right?" Although as I'm making this statement, I'm also realizing that a lot of SMBs and TSBs, again, totally my acronym, no one else uses it, they outsource IT, right, to some sort of help desk, and so this would also be possible for small businesses. But when you look at SMB scales quite up to quite a few people. And as soon as you have that disconnect, as soon as you have the "I don't know Steve, the IT guy," right, this hack becomes possible. Now, what I remember when I used to work at a very not small business, it was a $35 billion credit card company. We constantly hammered into we had like 10,000 users, right? And we constantly hammered in that no one from IT will ever do that. We will never ask for your password, right? But that isn't the case at SMBs. It's really common, especially I think in Windows environments, which is the predominant environment, right? Mm-hmm. It's easier as an IT person if I know your password, right? Right. Because there's so many little things that I do that require me to be, to type in the admin password. Yep. So how do we deal with that? How do we,
I think you've hit on a couple of key points that a lot of small and medium-sized businesses do outsource their IT functions to another firm. The company that I work for, Mindshift Technologies, is one such example. So it is very common that a lot of support functions happen remotely or via phone conversation. So you're not able to see the person that you're communicating with, and you have to make some assumptions that the person that's contacting you is actually a support person. However, we still advocate that customers institute security awareness training and policies as a strong mitigation against this tactic. Your employees or employees of a small to medium-sized business, regardless, should never be expected to give out their password in order to obtain support. The person on the other end of the phone that's providing the support should have the administrative access necessary, if needed, to reset the password or set the password to something that they can use to assist you. But what you should never do is provide them with your password. So even though that may be fairly common, I think therein lies the problem. It's common, and it really is a practice that we frown upon. So when we provide support to customers and provide them advice for mitigating against social engineering attacks, such as the one we've used in our first scenario, we do tell our customers not to give us passwords under any circumstances. Don't feel pressured, don't feel compelled to do so. We don't need it for the purposes of support. So make sure that you've got a policy in place that really explains that and reinforce that through awareness training, not only for existing employees, but for new hires, because sometimes those could be the ones that are more vulnerable because they're not necessarily familiar with how things work. So definitely security awareness training, regardless of size of firm, is important. And I know a lot of small and medium-sized businesses don't necessarily have the resources to institute robust security awareness training program. So in addition to having conversations with customers and advocating that they do this, we send out a monthly security newsletter to our entire customer base that makes them aware of common security concerns that they should be aware of, both for the purposes of awareness and for the purposes of prevention. So a point of contact at a small firm that does business with Mindshift can take this information, pass it on to their user base, and through that ultimately institute some security awareness training. And another great resource that I like to share with people is US CERT, the Computer Emergency Readiness Team, has great security tips that you can extract and provide to your users on a monthly basis, and perhaps roll that up to an annual security awareness training. That is a free resource that's great for small and medium-sized firms that, in addition to what we provide our customers, can complement a security awareness training program and really raise the awareness level at a small firm as it relates to security-related matters.
Yeah, because social engineering is the toughest one to handle, and training is really the only way to handle that, right? So I'd summarize this one as, number one, if your IT practices have you ever asking for your user's password, then fix that, right? That's wrong. And then second, once you fix that, then you say, from this day forward, IT will never ask for your password. And if someone does, they're not from IT. All right.
Right.
So let's jump to the next one.
Sure. So the next breach actually took place at a law firm of McKenna, Long, and Aldridge. And in this case, the hacker obtained credentials of an administrator account. And using the administrator account credentials, was actually able to gain access remotely to this firm's network. And in doing so, they were able to extract information about the clients of this business and ultimately steal information from the firm.
Do they know how the account was compromised in the beginning?
It's not clear. So, one of the possibilities here is it could be similar to the incident that we just described, where the administrative credentials were extracted from somebody through social engineering. Another common problem that we see is administrative accounts don't have strong passwords. So perhaps they're using a very well-known password, such as password or password1. There's a lot of vulnerability scanners that operate on the internet that scan, look for the ability to log on remotely, and will supply commonly used credentials as a means of gaining access to the network. It's also possible that they were stolen through some other matter. So we're not quite sure exactly how it happened, but we do know that the bad guys got access to an administrative account, highly privileged account, and used that to remotely access the network and steal information.
If you're an administrator, you have great power, and therefore you have the responsibility, a much greater responsibility than the regular user, to protect your credentials, right? To have a good password, right? Admin people should figure something out, right? There's a really nice comic strip thing on how to have a good solid password, with good entropy, not using the usual mechanisms. Get something that is a good password, is rememberable, and usable, and then, if possible, wherever possible, I would say to authenticate or to create two-factor authentication, right? There are lots of examples of companies that didn't. It's not always possible to institute two-factor authentication, but wherever possible, do so. That way, if something stupid does happen, right, then you can they won't be able to exploit it.
Yeah.
Right?
You're hitting the nail on the head. I mean, I think if you're a small business and you're listening to this and you're wondering what actions can you take, number one, if you don't have it already, introduce complex passwords. These should be 8-character minimum, include small and medium-sized characters, base 10-digit, special characters. You want passwords to be complex. So I think that's important. Number two is require frequent change. Passwords should be changed every 90 days. And I know that that's something that people tend to struggle with and don't necessarily like or favor, but the world has changed. And to keep the same password for a long period of time just increases the likelihood that somebody's going to discover it and use it. Secondly, I would also audit any accounts with remote access. Does the administrator account need remote access to the network? Are there other accounts that can remote into the network? And is it really necessary for that person to perform their job? Do they need remote access? Oftentimes you'll find there's accounts that are set up with remote access rights that don't need it. So definitely perform that. Secondly, institute a process that's very robust to make sure that when somebody leaves the company, that their account is disabled and no longer usable. Companies tend to have lax controls around this. And with shadow IT and with the proliferation of creating user accounts for various applications, it's not uncommon for accounts to be left behind even after the employee leaves the organization. Those accounts are really a prime candidate for either that employee to use to gain access back into the network, or for somebody to hack, if you will, and come under the guise of a legitimate account and really perform bad things. Lastly, multi-factor authentication is really important. So typically we consider multi-factor authentication to be something you know, which would be your username and password, something you are, which might be biometrics like an iris scan, or something you have, which is a token. Multi-factor authentication should require two of those three things, and you should have it at minimum for remote access purposes. So that way, if that administrator account is compromised and the password is gleaned, you cannot use that account unless you have that second factor of authentication. We have a multi-factor program that allows the token to be a mobile phone. Mobile phones have become very ubiquitous. Everybody has them. So we have remote access features that require a username and password. In addition to that, a second factor, which is a mobile phone authenticator. So in the event that somebody's account or credentials are stolen, remote access isn't granted unless that mobile phone is in hand and you choose allow for remote access. So definitely do those.
Yeah, and I'll just say this because I was this guy, right? Security's a pain in the butt. Right? Let's just say it. Two-factor having using two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication is harder than not, right? It's easier just to remember a password. And if you're that person that is the way I was back in the day, that is basically fighting the use of two-factor authentication or defeating the use of two-factor authentication, stop it. Right? Because you are the weakest link, right?
Right.
So use it where you can, turn it on where you can. Any cloud vendors that you have that enable that, because all cloud is remote access, right? Turn that stuff on so that if you you can also do things like whitelisting, where, like, for example, our website is I don't know, in some data center somewhere, right? But in order to administer that website, you need to be here in this office and show up as the IP address that is this office. And if that's not the case, if I'm somewhere where I need to administer it remotely, I call the help desk and I say, hey, I'm here. This is me. I authenticate myself via some other mechanism, and then they add that IP address to the whitelist, right? So, it's a pain, but you just you need to.
Yeah.
So let's move on to I don't know. Did you have a last thought on there? Because we're
No, I think I agree with you. Generally speaking, security and convenience often butt heads. But I think the security world has become wise to this. And a lot of the security features, such as two-factor authentication, where it integrates with your mobile phone and you don't have to carry those old key fobs, have really added an element of convenience that make it more palatable. So, make sure as a part of your criteria for, using cloud technologies that you consider whether they have strong authentication and perhaps multi-factor available. I think it's an important thing to have in place to protect against the hack we just spoke about.
Yep. All right. So what's next?
All right.
We have to pick up the pace a little bit, by the way, if we're going to fit this. If we're going to fit this into time slot.
There's so much to talk about here. Let me tell you. All right. So the next one is a ransomware attack. So I know we hear about this a lot, and there's been a lot of press about this lately. But basically, somebody that fell victim to a phishing scheme where they received an email that looked legitimate. They clicked on the link, and unbeknown to them, they installed malware, which is ultimately ransomware. And ransomware is a very nasty thing where it encrypts your data. It uses a public-private key encryption scheme, exports the private key to the bad guys, and you get a pop-up on your screen that basically forces you to pay a ransom in order to receive the private encryption key back, which is ultimately needed to unlock your data.
Yeah, that's just I don't know. That just sucks, right? And this one again, I think this just goes back to user education, right? Well, I'd say two things. One, because we're going to get to my favorite subject in a minute, right? The user education, right? So look, don't click on links and open attachments, and the more you can educate, you talked about your resource that you have. There are certain types of files there are certain types of emails that are repeated, like the IT support guy calling to ask for your password. There's things that you'll get an email that doesn't make any sense. It's like, here's our latest bill from this credit card company who I'm not doing any business with, and all I have to do is double click this .exe file to see the bill, right? Hello, right? That's not my credit card company, and I should not be clicking on an exe file or a zip file from somebody I don't know, right? So you do that. And then number two, actually, I'm going to say number one, back your crap up so that if you get ransomware, you can go, screw you, and then just, restore, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
No, you're hitting on key points. Again, there's probably an underlying theme that's happening here. And I think making sure that you secure the human is a really important element. We've got such great controls on the perimeter. We've got firewalls, we've got next generation, we've got all these protections in place to keep the bad guys out. So what they've really done is they've kind of pivoted and they've started attacking the human. Perhaps the weakest point on the network. So without a shadow of a doubt, security awareness training is an important element, but there's other things you can do here as well. Number two, in addition to training your employees, is contact your anti-spam and your antivirus vendors. We have done this regularly to help protect our customers. Make sure that you're instituting best practices to protect against ransomware and more modern threats. A lot of times, organizations institute antivirus and they think they're done. They buy anti-spam, they think they're done. And there's never any changes that are made to those products. They're just running, and it's kind of a binary thought. We have it or we don't. But there's a lot of tweaking. There's a lot of things that you can do to help protect your network from advanced threats such as ransomware. So I definitely suggest, and we do this on behalf of our customers, but if you're in a circumstance where you've got an existing provider or existing tool set in place, talk to them. Their security products are evolving all the time, and it's likely that they're instituting new features that they don't commonly turn on because they're worried about compatibility issues with programs that you can flip the switch on and perhaps secure your network. You have to do it with testing and all that kind of stuff, but definitely reach out to them and see what capabilities exist. The third thing is, as an organization, and this is more related along the lines of disaster recovery, think about how much data can you afford to lose as a business? What is your recovery time objective and your recovery point objectives? And make sure that they're in alignment with the expectation or the requirements of the organization. So in the event that you're victimized by a ransomware attack and your data is encrypted and you're going back to that backup tape or whatever backup technology that you have, which restores your data, is in alignment with what you can afford to lose. If you're doing backups on a nightly basis and you can only afford to lose an hour's worth of data, the backup scheme isn't in alignment with the recovery point objective of your firm. Talk to your provider. We talk to our customers about this type of thing all the time. Dial up or dial down your backup scheme to ensure it's in alignment with the requirements of the business. Lastly, consider advanced threat protection. There are new products on the market. We have one that we're bringing to our customers that provides advanced threat protection against products or hacks such as ransomware. Ransomware typically is protected or is fought against by an antivirus product, but an antivirus product is signature driven. It has to know about it. The problem is ransomware is evolving all the time, and the people that author this malware know that. So they're constantly trying to leapfrog technology such as antivirus, which has to know about it in order to protect against it. Some advanced threat protection technologies, such as one we're instituting for our customers, can protect against zero-day threats. It can protect against the unknown. And I think that's probably where customers have to go to in order to really protect their network against this really nefarious ransomware that is making the hackers a lot of money, and they're really incented to keep doing that.
Yeah, all right. So we've got two more to cover and only a few minutes left.
Okay.
Let's jump into that, the thumb drive.
Yeah. This is an example of a legal firm, adult and pediatric dermatology, that had protected health information stored on an unencrypted USB drive, had it sitting in a vehicle, a thief saw it, broke the window, grabbed the data, and ultimately there were 2,200 of employee patient records sitting on that thumb drive. I think the firm was looking to maybe not make a big deal about this, but somebody reported it to the Office of Civil Rights, and ultimately they were audited and found not to be in compliance with HIPAA and fined $150,000 for this breach. So I think a key lesson to learn here is you need to make sure that you know where your data is and what the classification of that data is. So if you've got protected health information on for example, thumb drives, you really need to think about whether that's the place where that type of data should be. And if it is, how are you protecting it? We advocate our customers acquire a technology called Data Locker, which is a drive that you can buy online. It's not cheap, but it's hardware-based encryption. So it's encrypted by default. You can put data on there, and whether it's lost or stolen, the bad guy that steals it or finds it, it's all ciphertext. It's useless. And further, you don't have to report something like that because the data is protected under reasonable measures. So really an expensive lesson learned for this firm around a lost or stolen USB drive, rather, with protected health information on it.
Yeah. So summary would be, if you think you need data on some sort of mobile device, make sure you really, 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 really do, and there isn't some other way to do that. And
right.
then the other would be, if you really have to have a mobile device, be it a thumb drive, be it a hard drive, or be it a tape, then encrypt that sucker. And if you don't know how to do that, Google is your friend, and there are solutions for all of those. And I know that your report covers that as well. So let's talk about the Internet of Things.
Yeah, the Internet of Things is really kind of an evolution where everything that is becoming IP accessible. Thermostats from Nest, refrigerators, everything that you can basically place in the home and the business is becoming IP accessible for the sake of convenience, and perhaps there's this coolness factor to it and other benefits. However, the danger with that is now everybody is a developer. People are writing software for all sorts of things to become administratable over the Internet. And the concern with that is that there's potentially a lot of best practices that aren't being followed. So, really an example of this was an appliance that was placed at a customer network, which was IP accessible, was basically set up with default credentials that were available through Google. What are the default credentials for this device? And basically, with that information, a person was able to log onto that device and access all of its contents. And when you get into things like thermostats and stuff like that, there's a lot of things you can do that can really disrupt a business. You can dial the thermostat up, you can dial it down, you can do all sorts of things that could really seem a little innocuous, but once it's done, you realize how invasive that can be. So it's really time for small businesses to start thinking about this wave of Internet of Things, which really is kind of dovetailing onto the BYOD proliferation, and what you want to do about potentially those devices coming into your network. You got to kind of plan and prepare for that, and have policies and kind of practices in place that prepares your company for what those are.
Yeah, and I think, again, this goes back, it's all about the user. You can plan all you want, right? Mm-hmm. And so eventually, I was just looking around on my desk at the number of Internet of Things devices, and you get a gadget freak like me, right? And mm-hmm. they're gonna bring that stuff in, right? So you've got to have some sort of plan to look for that type of stuff. And you mentioned, like what do you call it, a compromised device. My question is, what about a device that's compromised by design, right? There's potentially malware that could be on these devices. It will happen. It probably has happened, right? And you buy this device that's, I'm looking over at my my TARDIS over there, and the purpose of this TARDIS is to be an advanced persistent threat, right? Mm-hmm. And so you got to be aware of that stuff as well, right? This is like I think this is the next thing that we're going to have to worry about is all the little devices that people bring in that are all talking IP and looking at what they're doing.
Right. Yeah, we talk to customers about this and consult them through that. So we try to, identify the devices that are coming on network, talk to them about it in advance, kind of put them through a risk register, and then implement plans to help them make sure that they're mitigating the risks associated with their network. Some examples of that might be, making sure that you change the default credentials is a simple one, but perhaps you can even integrate it with your centralized authentication structure. So you're using passwords that you use to get onto the network to actually access that device for administration. Also, perhaps segmenting them and segmenting them via firewall. So you want to have all these neat gadgets, but they're not necessarily core to your business. Perhaps you can protect your production network by putting them off on a separate network and segmenting with a firewall.
Right.
We've got consultants and technology experts that can design and implement that and really protect your network against the potential that it's compromised or used in a manner that's not acceptable to the firm, and that doesn't percolate over into the production side of your network.
Yeah, so you shouldn't be able in a company, even a small company, you shouldn't be able to just simply know the Wi-Fi password and get yourself on the network without at least to get on the internal network without some authentication, right? Okay, what is this thing that needs an IP address? Oh, well, it's my toaster. It's my internet-enabled toaster that I can email from my house, and I don't know if we need it. Are there internet-enabled toasters? I think there are.
There probably are. If not, somebody's thinking about it right now and writing some really, poorly written code to make
fundamentally
it
wrong,
accessible.
right? I can think about, there are a lot of really cool things that are being done with internet-enabled devices. I'm just thinking toaster is definitely the dumbest idea that I. But anyway, well, listen, I think we're out of time. Do you have any final thoughts?
I think all of these breaches were preventable. And I think as you kind of reflect upon these breaches, it's important to consider, what you might do within your business to help prevent the likelihood that this could happen to you. At Mindshift, we think about this all the time. We've got a dedicated team of people that this is their core focus, myself included. And as a result of that type of concentrated effort, we've come up with a lot of solutions that can help small and medium-sized businesses not fall victim to this type of stuff. So definitely Google is your friend. Definitely think reflectively on how you would prevent it against your business, and perhaps talk to a firm like a Mindshift that has a lot of expertise around this that can help your business avoid this type of circumstance from coming about.
I hope that we gave, anybody that's watching, I hope we gave you at least one, oh crap, where you got to go. You're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that one. Anyway, so thanks for taking the time today, Matt, and I'll hand things back over to David.
All right, Curtis and Matt, thanks very much. Great webinar, guys. Excellent job. And thank you all for joining. We hope you enjoyed this latest webinar at Truth in IT. Don't forget to check out our other upcoming webinars and videos at truebit.tv as well as truthinit.com. Also, don't forget to check out the largest independent site for backup and recovery information, product reviews, and independent research at backupcentral.com. Also, Truth in IT runs a seminar series around the US and UK called Truth in Backup and Truth in Storage, and you can find more information on that when we come to a city near you at truthinit.com. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Truth in IT. For now, again, we want to thank Matt Lunzer, the Director of Information Security with Mindshift, as well as Curtis Preston, CEO of Truth in IT. And again, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us today. For now, thanks again, everyone, for joining, and we want to wish you all a great day.